O, zdravo svima. Vidite. To ne želimo pokazati. Ne to. Ok, nice. Whoopsie daisy, kako bi se rekao. Baš sam si lazy. Šta je danas radi, ne vidim. Fuck off, bitch. Eat shit and die, boy. Ja, sada gubimo malo danas. Ideš. To se zove spotted AF. Oh shit. Oh damn. Okay. Oh! Dobro. Bad idea. Ideš. To se zove spotted AF. Oh shit. Čekaj malo, moram kompresor si namjestiti. Properties. He, ha, hu, hi, ha, ho, ho, ho. Test. Evo ga, došli smo na kompresor. I sada, nice, gain 15 dB. Imamo otprilike ovako. Evo, super se čuje, nice. Hello guys, welcome to the channel. Volim si glas slušat lama. Ok. Dakle, danas igramo Tenkići. Kao što vidite, title je Tenkići. Dakle, igramo igru koji su Tenkići. Yep. That's all, folks. Ajmo s ovim. Ovaj mi se sviđa. Njemački tenkovi su cool. Pardon, Tenkići. Njemački Tenkići su cool. Danas je zanimljiv dan bio. Spao sam svega 1,5 sat. I dosta dobro se držim čak. Zadovoljan sam. Sleep is for the weak. And human. And I'm neither. Ha! I do need to poop every now and again. But we don't say that in public. Okay. Good shit. I have a derp gun. It's so big. Los geht's! Oj, oj. Evo ga, pandemoni. O! Oh shit. Zaboravimo. Ideš. U čelo. Kinda safe here. In my cello. Head on, apply directly to your forehead. Shit. Wait, shit. Let's hit this guy. Bruh. Whoa, bounce, bounce. Shitty cannon. Nope. Boogie, destroyed me. Ne znam igrat sa antitenkovima. Da, dakle cilj je otključati nove tenkiće. Vidjet ćemo hoće li to biti izvedivo s ovim. Živim u nadi. Živim u nadi. Jedini razlog zašto igram s ovim je da zato što mi vizualno izgledaju fora. Uopće ne mislim da su nešto posebno dobri bili. Njemački tenkovi. Ali izgledaju dosta cool. Neki Warhammer lore. Empire. Dobro, Empire iz Warhammera je modeliran prema ovom Reichu, valjda, ili prema njemačkom carstvu. Ali mislim da je uzeo i nešto iz tog Reicha. Oh shit. I'm dead now? No, I'm good now. hit, yes hit. Hit, okay. O, bog te neće. Biću. Ah! Hit him. Hit the fucker. I hit the fucker. Yes! Dead the fucker. Odlično. Onda ovog. Oh fuck. Okay. Time to go. I'm looking for a tactical advantage. What's the mission there? Survive, okay. Onda ne moram nikomu nići. Teoriji. Mogu čekat da ovaj spuša. Okay. That kind of sucks. Čekat ću. Okay. Okay, easy win. Što na nuistad sam, god damn it, man. Cat rips a jewel. Te vidio, šokirao. Predobar je.
Tenkići!
Tenkaju cijelu noć. Se baš kao po 5.
Burazni mi brada.
I call this great success. Oh, mission. Ovog moram, ovog.
He's trying to get a fucking rip of the jewel.
Da, čekaj.
On to program Representative Ro Khanna. He represents California's 17th congressional district located in the heart of Silicon Valley. He is serving his third term. Representative Khanna is, of course, a Democrat, and for that we're extremely grateful because it's fun to have on people from the other party and actually talk through the issues. Representative Khanna, thanks so much for joining the show.
Dan, thank you for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, you bet. So let's talk about minimum wage because you sort of made the news last week when you were criticized for some comments that you made about the minimum wage and small businesses. The implication seemed to be that if businesses weren't paying higher minimum wage, then maybe they didn't deserve to be in business. So what did you mean by those comments?
Well, let me clarify it. I am a strong supporter of small business. I understand the need for small business. I do believe in the $15 minimum wage. My belief is that the Amazons, Targets, Walmarts can easily pay that. But I understand that small businesses may have a difficult time in doing that. That's why it needs to be gradual, and that's why we need to have tax credits and other assistance to small business so that they can do that.
So let's talk about the actual policy, the actual $15 minimum wage. So I obviously am an opponent of $15 minimum wage. When it comes to the minimum wage, there are a bevy of studies, including Congressional Budget Office studies, suggesting that it depresses employment, that for people who actually receive the minimum wage, of course, they get paid more. But for a lot of other people, it pushes them out of the job market because
the idea that some minimum wages cause unemployment, I don't think that's correlation is not shown. The only one that I know that people go back and forth on was the recent 15 an hour one in Seattle, but maybe we can check. This is going to be all over the 15 an hour.
Just wanted to say
15 is bad. 15 is just too much. God, it's too much.
it is not like businesses actually just have a giant Scrooge McDuck money bank out back, and they're just holding a bunch of cash out there in order to somehow, disadvantage their employees. That there is a labor market in which there are a lot of people willing to work for a particular wage, and that they're paying the labor essentially what the labor is willing to accept in order to work at these particular jobs. When you're talking about competitive job markets, especially at the lower end of the wage spectrum, isn't it true that there is a supply and demand issue that actually develops the wage? Or why do you think that it's artificially low, in other words?
Sure. Let me suggest the two places we disagree. Your view, as I understand it, is this is a contract between two free individuals. Why is the government, the state, getting involved in trying to set the price? My view is that in certain cases, especially where you have monopsonies, where you have a high concentration.
This is the correct answer. The monopsony power of certain businesses means they control probably too much of the labor market. So there's not really a very real supply and demand thing going on. It's more that one person, one buyer of labor has too much of the control over the market. So you don't have the ability to negotiate wages well.
concentration in labor markets. There are only a few buyers. It's not a truly competitive market. It's actually a market failure. And so you have a wage that is under the competitive market price. In fact, Milton Friedman in 1976 wrote about this possibility that monopolies could distort the market wage. Second, and I think this is just a good faith disagreement, you would argue people have genuine bargaining power, and you have this concept of negative freedom, that the state shouldn't interfere. My view is that more of positive freedom, that people actually need basic support to be able to bargain effectively. And I don't think that there's true equal bargaining power often.
So there are a couple of issues that I see in some of the stuff that you're saying here, just on the specific level. Obviously, the vast majority of employees at places like Amazon are actually not making the minimum wage. The fact is that the minimum wage is only being made by something like 2.3% of all wage.
The minimum wage is being made by very few employees. While this is true, right, an increase of even $1 or $2 an hour is going to impact more than just the people making it, right? It'll impact the people that would be in between what the new minimum wage would be and what the old one was. This is a comment talking about that, like only 2 or 3% of people even make the minimum wage. That's true, but it kind of misses the point.
Earners in the United States, about 50% of those wage earners are under the age of 25. And when you artificially boost the minimum wage, what you actually end up doing is making it harder for people who actually need the minimum wage jobs to get those jobs, because you have artificially created a base in the labor market from which employers are going to draw. So in other words, a $15 wage is the kind of wage that you pay to somebody who graduated from college. It's not typically the kind of wage that you pay for somebody who graduated from high school. And you see this historically with the minimum wage. When the federal minimum wage was increased, then people who went to high school had a much higher employment rate before, and then the minimum wage was increased, and then the unemployment rate among high school educated rose dramatically. It is not racially, it is not
I don't know if dramatic is the right word, but typically increases in the minimum wage are going to impact people with only a high school education. This is true.
Actually equal that way, actually. Minimum wage increases disproportionately hit black and brown people without college degrees, particularly. So why is raising the minimum wage overall a good idea?
Well, but you're right. Right now, maybe it's 2.3%. I think you're part of the study, but that's at $7.25, and there are 30 million or so of Americans who make between $7.25 and $15.
Izdržat.
That's, yep, correct.
I think the studies go both ways. Some people have argued, and there's studies showing that it increases productivity, it makes workers happier, it actually increases a business's profitability. I agree there's studies showing that that may not be the case. One interesting study I saw is that what it really forces businesses to do is require high school as a credential. And this, a fair point would be saying that this may make it difficult for those who don't haven't finished high school to get one of those jobs. But for 90% of Americans who have a high school degree, they will be able to get that job and pay more. So I guess the studies are there are studies all over the place on this. My view is that the country would be better off with a higher wage.
Who the fuck is this guy? This guy? What? This guy actually feels like he knows what he's talking about. Democrat? Nice.
Oh ne. Woohoo.
Let's see. Graduated from Council Rock High School in Pennsylvania. BA in Economics with honors from the University of Chicago in 1998, where he was a Phi Beta Kappa.
Oh ne, molim.
He got a JD from Yale. Okay, nice. Cool, awesome. Sounds like he remembers what he studied.
Oh.
Ways that would help productivity, help the happiness of our employees.
I mean, the simple kind of rebuttal to that is if it really improved profitability for businesses to provide higher wages, then they would do it. And you would need the government to actually step in and force them to do it, being that businesses are profit-driven primarily.
It's a fair point. That's if you believe that businesses always are acting in their rational long-term interest. My view is that sometimes businesses are very short-term focused and may not be making the long-term investments. But the second case is, let me ask you, are there any times you believe that the government should interfere? For example, overtime laws. We're required to pay a time and a half. Would you support that? I mean, there are a lot of times that the state has made regulations to say that this helps the bargaining power and makes for a better labor market.
Yeah, and I'm very much against virtually all of that. I'm extremely libertarian when it comes to labor markets, particularly because I believe that monopoly is actually created by some of the regulatory innovations that people have come up with. In fact, I think there's a reason why big corporations have typically pushed for a higher minimum wage when it becomes clear this is going to happen, because you're right, Amazon can absorb that blow a lot more easily than the mom and pop shop that is down the street. It actually increases their ability to drive other people out of the market. If everybody is required to pay a higher wage, then Amazon can spread that out over the price of its products. It can spread it out over its 83% market share in like the book market. It can upcharge people on the product.
This is true. They're both bringing up good points. Regulations typically favor larger businesses because larger businesses are more easily able to absorb costs. Larger businesses are easily able to offload costs into other parts of their business because they reached an economy of scale, meaning they're large enough and they're efficient enough that like any individual regulation typically won't have a massive impact on their business.
In a way that small mom and pop stores cannot. Increasing minimum wage obviously disproportionately affects places that have 3 employees as opposed to places that have 300 employees, of which 30 are actually minimum wage employees.
Well, you're right about that, and this is you're right that the impact on certain small businesses is harder, and that we have to take action to help those small businesses. I mean, I acknowledge that that point. I will say though that in small communities, rural communities, often you have the case that these are highly concentrated markets, and in that case, you have employers having a lot more monopsony power to be able to set the wage in not truly competitive markets. But to the extent that my comments in the past were not sensitive enough in the way I phrased it to the challenges of small business, I acknowledge that challenge. I agree with you that it's going to be much harder for certain small businesses, and we have to be honest about it. I mean, we can't. I want to engage in an honest conversation, and to pretend that there's small businesses that aren't going to be affected and that should be helped would not be correct.
We'll get to more with Congressman Ro Khanna of the 17th District of California in just 1 second. He's a Democrat from Silicon Valley. Let me tell you something about Silicon Valley. You don't want those people to have your data. Well, ExpressVPN is masked and your network data becomes encrypted, so your ISP can't see anything you do. The app connects with just one click. It is lightning fast. It is the only VPN I trust because they use a trusted server. Find out how you can get 3 months of ExpressVPN for free by visiting expressvpn.com/Ben or clicking the link in the description below. It's super easy. See, check out my computer. See, here's ExpressVPN. It is open, and boom, clicking to connect, and it's going connected. So now I'm protected, and so is my data. That is the important thing. Protect your data today. Find out how you can get 3 months of ExpressVPN for free by visiting expressvpn.com/Ben or clicking the link in the description box.
What does monopsony mean? Monopsony is when a single buyer controls a disproportionately large part of the market. I believe it's monopsony.
Low. And the other big problem with a federal minimum wage is that it is federal. I mean, when we're talking about setting one standard minimum wage across an entire country, where wages are extremely different in Mississippi than they are in California. In California, a $15 minimum wage in a place like your district or a place where I was living until very recently, LA, you get a $15 minimum wage, that buys you like a 1-bedroom studio apartment. If you get a $15 minimum wage in Mississippi, that is literally the median wage in Mississippi. Right? There are states where there are wildly disparate numbers as far as what wages are actually worth in particular states. Why in the world would the federal government set a federal minimum wage that is so high that it is actually at or close to, I believe the median wage in Mississippi right now is $14.23 an hour. Why would they set a median wage?
This is true. I have no idea what an effective counter is against this.
A minimum wage that is above the median wage in a place like Mississippi, when a minimum wage in California, $15 an hour, basically buys you a candy bar.
Well, again, this is a debate about the floor. I agree with you. In my district, $15 isn't enough. And the question is, should there be regional variance? Yes. And then the question becomes, what is the floor?
I mean, we have a federalist system, so there's a real easy solution here, right? I mean, we actually have like cities and states, and they can do this sort of thing.
Right, but the question is, there should be a national floor. And now I'm saying the floor should be $15. Do you believe there should be any floor? I mean, do you think, $7.25 I think is unreasonable. I mean, for example, Cotton and Ronnie have said the floor should be $10. I think Holly is saying it should be $15, but for billion corporations, where would you set the floor?
I mean, there is unfortunately, there is a floor, and the floor is zero, and it's going to be felt by 1.4 million people who won't have a job come 2025 if we raise this to $15 minimum wage.
I guess my question is for you, would you support any national federal minimum wage?
Fuck the people.
No. I mean, again, I think free labor is
money.
A better question, rather than would you support any federal minimum wage, a better question is, would you support industries that could only survive if they were paying their workers $1.50 an hour? That would be a more interesting question.
Is able to bargain, and if you can come up with a case where you have an actual monopoly that is violating labor law in its attempts to cram down a wage on a person who's unwilling to accept it, first of all, we have an amendment.
Monopolies are boring. Monopsonies are more interesting to talk about. Monopolies are very, 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 very hard to find. Monopsonies are much more common when it comes to labor markets because people aren't able to travel around cities. People aren't able to get to other places of employment. It can be more common to run into that than an actual true monopoly where there's only a single employer.
It's the Constitution that prevents involuntary servitude. And second of all, bargaining power is still a thing. I mean, the fact is that there are wages that people cannot charge because people will not take the jobs for those wages. I mean, that does exist. And by the way, if you're worried about wages being depressed, then there's a case to be made that one of the things we should be worried about is cracking down on businesses that are using illegal immigration in states like California.
But what would you say to the argument for monopsony? Freeman argues. Now, in fairness, he says this is a rare case, and he was against minimum wage and just in premise. But he says, look, there are cases where you have 1 or 2 employers in a town, and they're not charging a competitive price because you don't have the choice to go to 4 or 5 different employers. And in those cases, it's a market failure. That certainly seems as one case. And then we can disagree about negotiating. But I guess the broader point, in my view, Ben, is that I believe in entrepreneurship, I believe in innovation, I believe in capitalism, I call myself a progressive capitalist, is when we're producing such incredible wealth, billions of dollars in my district, the ability to have people earn a wage that allows them to live a decent life seems to be something that's good for our democracy.
Yeah, I mean, my counterpoint is that we are not producing incredible wealth. These companies are producing incredible wealth because they know how to run the business better than members of government who are, getting their salary from me, frankly, and from these businesses that actually are paying extraordinary levels of tax. Representative Ro Khanna, I really appreciate you coming on the program, and it's great to have conversations like this. So thank you for reaching out, because you reached out after I think I noted something on the show about your comments, and so it's great to have you on to clarify your position on this, and I think it's really important to do it. So again, just want to thank you for your time.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you're having a very civil, reasonable exchange. One place we agree upon is you said that I read somewhere that rational debate is what's necessary in our democracy, and I wish we had more exchanges like this across the country.
I really appreciate it, and I certainly hope that you're not canceled for having appeared on the show. Representative.
We'll see.
Well, I wish they'd actually come to like a resolution.
Sure. So the 3 things to mention here are 1, the monopsony model. So I think that one thing that people keep referring to is that there's this idea of a simple supply and demand, like crossing curves like this. And if you increase the wage, you're like putting an arbitrary floor. So therefore, you're limiting people's employment. The problem is that the real world is not a supply and demand model because of something called monopsony. Workers don't have equal power with their employers. There are people who own capital. Not everyone has capital, and therefore they have access to who works. That is like, if you want John Romer, Marxian socialist analysis, you can go read that if you want.
Where is low skilled labor? Where's the monopsony in low skilled labor?
Sure. The idea of monopsony is that workers don't have sufficient power to bargain up their wages.
But where, like, show me any, like, how many places
I mean,
is there like, only one person hiring low-skilled labor? Usually low-skilled labor.
Sure. If we just want to do the semantics thing, I can call it oligopsony or whatever. Okay, I don't care.
It's not semantics. I'm saying, like, show me examples of where, like, how much monopsony on low-skilled labor are there?
Let him finish his point.
Sure. So it's not about monopsony. It's about there being, in general, a high concentration of labor. I can send you a study. I think it's AZAR 2017, which showed that I think each decile increase of labor market concentration led to like a 5% decrease in posted wage or something along those lines. Like more concentrated labor markets where there are fewer.
We're only talking about minimum wage, like very low skilled labor, right? So in those, among people who are going to be affected by minimum wage, where's there only one company hiring people at minimum wage?
Sure. It's a pretty specific question. That's going to be really hard to answer.
There's monopsony in that they're limited employers, and there's also monopsony from the very fact that workers don't have equal power. I don't know how to make that more clear. It's that there are. So if we want to call it something else, if we want to call it market power, I'd be happy to do so. Okay. Now maybe market power and monopsony, you know, you can equate the two, but I don't really care about the terminology. The idea is that this is something we can empirically measure, we can observe it, and we can see that like when you raise things up to the point where like monopsony, there's not disemployment. Even within, this is working within neoclassical models.
No, I mean, you can theoretically, you can say if there was one employer, then you have if there was a monopoly situation, then you can use the model to show that it's possible a minimum wage could actually raise these, make the market more efficient. But I'm saying, where is that actually the case? Where is there a monopsony on low-skilled employment, on minimum wage employment? It just doesn't seem. It seems like low-skilled labor is the least likely thing to have a monopsony on, right? Because there's no skill, so you know, a low-skilled person can get a job at pumping gas or flipping burgers or all zillion other industries.
Flipping burgers and working at a McDonald's isn't low skill. It's actually very strenuous and hard to do.
Okay, fine. Like,
stop, Megan. Stop, dude. Stop. Okay, please stop saying stupid shit like this. Like, people moralize everything. You're not allowed to say something is like low skill without being like dude. I don't want to fucking virtue zone. I wonder if this motherfucker's ever worked in a restaurant before. I'm so curious. Okay, there's somebody that works at McDonald's and then fucking line cooked. Like, I'm really curious. Like, is it hard work? Yes, it is. But just because something is hard doesn't mean it's high skill. High skill implies a lot of training, right? Like sometimes a whole 4 years worth of college of training. Just because something is difficult to do doesn't necessarily make it a high skill job. There are way more people in the United States that could be McDonald's workers than computer programmers, even if being a McDonald's worker might be a harder job than being a computer programmer. That's such a people moralize everything so much.
I gotta tell you what's the reality about progressives in Congress. So let me be clear, they do not have bad intent. They all mean well. They all want the $15 minimum wage passed. They want Medicare for all passed. They want Green New Deal passed. They want all of that. Okay, they're good people. But tonight they'll meet, and they will very likely decide to do nothing about putting $15 minimum wage back into the COVID relief bill. And that means we will lose on $15 minimum wage. But it also means, and this is the most disheartening part, and this is why I'm doing this video and telling you guys, that means we will lose from here on out. You must